This is part 2 of the true story of Melanie Pereira, a woman who was brought up on 4 drug-related charges in Ontario. If you haven't already watched part 1, then this part will contain spoilers, so now is your chance to turn back and go watch part 1. In the last video, I told you that the court found Melanie guilty on all counts, including the 2 conspiracy charges and the 2 charges related to possession for the purpose of trafficking. Now, this is the story of her sentencing hearing. When people are sentenced for their crimes in Canada, the court will generally take a careful look at the overall circumstances of their life and personal history. At the time of her crimes, Melanie was in her early 30s. Her parents had immigrated to Canada from Portugal in 1985, but they later returned to Portugal when Melanie was a teenager. She remained in Canada, but unfortunately, she didn't graduate from high school. To make ends meet, she took up part-time work during her school years and eventually transitioned to full-time service jobs after leaving school. Life took an unexpected turn for Melanie in April 2021 when she found herself pregnant with her first child. To add to the complexity, Melanie discovered that she was expecting another child due in June 2024, and neither of these pregnancies had been planned. It's important to note that Melanie had never been involved with drugs. More recently, her parents had returned to Canada, and she had been residing with them, diligently paying rent. At the time, she was employed in the restaurant industry, working hard to support herself and her family. The turning point in Melanie's life occurred in June 2020 when she lost her job due to the COVID-19 pandemic. This sudden job loss left her in a precarious financial situation, struggling to make ends meet. It was this financial vulnerability that ultimately led her down a path she deeply regretted, becoming involved in a drug conspiracy. But just so you know, boys and girls, money problems are not a legal justification for going full Breaking Bad. It was actually an old high school friend who had introduced Melanie to the other criminals I mentioned, who would ultimately change the course of her life. Personally, I've kept some of my friends from high school who grew up to be pretty great people. I can't really relate to the experience of a high school friend getting me involved in a drug conspiracy, but I could think of some people who might end up on one of my TikTok videos one day. And y'all know exactly who you are. Getting back to the case, Melanie's remorse ran deep as she grappled with the consequences of her actions. She faced the grim prospect of being separated from her first child while giving birth to her second child behind bars, serving a sentence of imprisonment. In this challenging time, Melanie found solace in the support of her family and the unwavering endorsement of numerous respected members of her community. They spoke highly of her generosity and commendable character, offering a glimmer of hope in her otherwise turbulent journey through the justice system. Mr. McAdam, representing the Crown, stood firmly in his quest for justice. He argued for an 8-year sentence in connection with the fentanyl charges, followed by a concurrent 5 to 6-year term for the cocaine-related crimes. For your reference, the word concurrent means that you serve your jail time for multiple crimes at the same time. So if you get a year for one charge and a year for another charge, instead of staying in jail for 2 years, you simply serve 1 year, essentially serving time for both crimes at the same time. It's kind of like a 2-for-1 discount for anyone who feels like being a menace to society. On the other side of the aisle, Mr. Marchetti, Melanie's defense attorney, had a different vision for her future. He sought a reformatory sentence of 2 years less a day, advocating for a more rehabilitative approach. It was a moment where the scales of justice teetered, caught between the desire to punish and the hope for redemption. The courtroom, however, wasn't just about passionate arguments and legal jargon. It was grounded in the principles of sentencing enshrined in the criminal code. Section 718 of the Code outlines the fundamental purpose of sentencing, which is to maintain a just, peaceful, and safe society by imposing just sanctions. These sanctions aim to achieve various objectives, including denouncing unlawful conduct, deterring offenders and potential wrongdoers, and aiding in rehabilitation. In the context of Melanie's case, where the charges revolved around trafficking in significant quantities of hard drugs, some of the primary goals of sentencing shone bright: denunciation and general deterrence. In other words, this particular brand of crime often demanded a strong message to discourage other members of society from doing the same thing. The judge also considered the significant role played by Melanie Pereira's co-conspirators, Tyler Burke and Kevin Henningham. Their legal fates were intertwined with Melanie's, and their sentencing outcomes were essential considerations in shaping her own destiny. As for Mr. Burke, his journey through the legal process took an unexpected turn. His lawyer was able to successfully bring something called a Section 8 charter application, referring to Section 8 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which states that everyone has the right to be secure against unreasonable search or seizure. That charter application resulted in the charges against him being stayed, which is another way of saying that bro fought the law and the law didn't win. In contrast, Mr. Henningham followed a different trajectory. He chose a different course, pleading guilty to various offenses, including trafficking in cocaine, but notably not fentanyl. However, his legal journey was intricate, involving other unrelated crimes. The specifics of how his sentence was apportioned among these various charges remained a mystery. Nonetheless, it was disclosed announced during Melanie's sentencing hearing that Kevin Henningham received a total prison sentence of 6 years and was also subject to a forfeiture order of $450,000, which, by the way, is just about enough to buy a storage closet in Toronto. After meticulously considering the principles of sentencing, the gravity of the crimes, Melanie's role within the trafficking scheme, her character, personal circumstances, and the impending arrival of her second child, the judge delivered the long-anticipated sentence. For all of Melanie's crimes, she was sentenced to a grand total of 60 months in prison, which is 5 years for anyone who was racing to their calculators. In addition to the prison sentence, Melanie was prohibited from possessing weapons for 10 years, and she was required to submit her DNA to police. If you found this content interesting, then don't forget to hit that like and follow button. I'm Ryan Keeney, and thanks for watching.